Ground control to Major Tom. Ground control to Major...
Hypno mind control for Major Tom.
Mind control. Mind control.
By chance his girlfriend came across a needle and soon she did the same. At home there were 17-year-old boys and their idea of fun is being in a gang called the Disciples, high on crack, toting a machine gun.
Do you
You wanna feel at home, 'cause you belong. Welcome to my nightmare. Welcome to my breakdown. I hope I didn't scare you. That's just the way we are when we come down. We sweat and laugh and scream here, 'cause life is just a dream here. You know inside you feel right at home here. You're welcome to my nightmare, yeah.
Your little mental illness calls it a conspiracy theory instead of reading the history of the people killing you and your fucking family.
Welcome to my nightmare. I think you're gonna like it. I think you're gonna feel you belong. We sweat and laugh and scream here, 'cause life is just a dream. You know inside you feel right at home here. Welcome to my nightmare. Welcome to my breakdown.
Dr. Martin Brenner arrives at Hawkins National Laboratory to oversee the MKate-Ultra program.
But all in all, the strangest thing about Stranger Things isn't just the fact that it reflects so many topics and themes that are a part of real conspiracies involving secret government projects and interdimensional entities and the development of things like psychic powers and dimensional portals and all the rest. It's the fact that even the show, Stranger Things, is itself actually a part of that grand conspiracy. That, quote, ancient work, the Mystery Babylon agenda. Far more than even most conspiracy researchers even realize.
Just 3 hours from Manhattan, on the eastern tip of Long Island, is Montauk, New York. There you'll find a mysterious abandoned military base called Camp Hero that spawned dozens of urban legends, from widespread child abductions to time travel to covert mind control experiments. These bizarre purported occurrences are collectively known as the Montauk Project.
Montauk's been an obsession of mine for over 30 years.
The story goes, between 1971 and 1983, secret experiments happened at the Camp Hero Air Force Base, which is only about a mile from here. When I was a kid, I walked along this stretch of shore here, and I didn't realize there was a base here until military personnel stopped me and told me to go the other way. And it sparked my interest for so many years going forward. I spent about 13 years investigating the alleged Montauk Project.
Local children were abducted off the streets, brought to the base, and subjected to brutal mind control experiments right under the now decaying Sage radar tower.
To be clear, the government's official position is there is no underground structure of any kind here at Camp Hero. Word is spread around town that we're here investigating, and a park employee, Joe Lafreno, has reached out to me claiming to be one of these victims who are known as the Montauk Boys.
It's good that I'm talking to you because it was difficult to find former Montauk Boys that would talk. Did you recall any memories at all of being in any government project? Yeah.
I remember in a big giant room, we were all young, very young, and it was dark, and I remember Preston Nichols standing in front of us, and he was giving orders. Preston was in charge of something. I don't remember them saying specific things, because I can't even say what he was talking about, but I know what he was asking us was criminal stuff.
Really?
Yeah, it was bad. Yeah, so I don't know what was going on. As a matter of fact, I've never remembered any of this before 1994.
That was shortly after Preston's book came out, the first one. That wasn't
Right,
long
exactly.
after.
There was like a book signing in Montauk, so I talked to Preston, and I thought it was for the very first time.
Right.
But he said, "Do you remember anything about the underground, or do you remember me?" And I said that I remember you, but it wasn't you. It had to be him, like many, many, many years ago.
Wow. So do you think it was a repressed memory?
Yeah. And then Preston said, I have like this ability or whatever to he called it deprogramming, but I believe it was some type of hypnosis. What I remember was being under hypnosis for about 20 minutes, but yet the clock on the wall said I was under for about 2 hours and 20 minutes.
Wow.
But then he played back a tape, and my voice was on that tape. I said the words, but I don't remember saying the words.
Right.
So it brought back the memories and made them real. Some people have said you probably put a message into your mind when you were under, and so you believe that this is true. But this stuff is just as real as me and you having a conversation.
Wow.
Yeah.
The Chemical Corps is testing psychochemical agents that temporarily change human behavior patterns. The cat's personality completely changed. Tests now in progress indicate that such agents have significant military potential.
Here is part of an interview with the subject just before LSD is to be administered.
I see. Do you feel you're normal?
I hope I'm normal. I think so.
Well, a little while back you took quite a series of psychological tests, and I can assure you that you're a very stable and well-balanced person as a result of it. Well, I think it's time for you to have your lysergic acid. Drink this down, and we'll be back after a while and see how you're doing.
This is a glass of water, colorless, tasteless. It contains 100 gamma of LSD-25, 1/10 of a milligram, the equivalent of 1/600 of a gram.
Well, tell me.
Well, I just couldn't. I couldn't possibly tell you. It's here. Can't you feel it? This whole room. Everything is in color, and I can feel the air. I can see it. I can see all the molecules. I'm part of it. Can't you see it?
I'm trying.
Oh, it's just like you're released, or you're free, or I don't know how I can tell you.
How do you feel inside?
Inside. I'm really inside.
Is it all one?
It would be all one if you weren't here, and if nobody else. Yes, everything is one. You have nothing to do with it. I am one with what I am. I can see everything in color. Everything. You have to see the air. You can't believe it.
For this experiment, a simple exercise was devised based on the internal security problems met by our forces during the Ioka campaign in Cyprus. 17 Marine volunteers were organized into a troop of 2 sections with a headquarters element. The troop was given the task of capturing as many terrorists as possible and of locating some stores which had been hidden in defined areas. These opening scenes are being shown to provide a composite picture of the high state of training of the men making up the troop, and also to provide a comparison with their performance on the second day when under the influence of the drug. The drug was given orally to the men in the hospital ward at 11:15, and they immediately embussed, arriving at the exercise area 10 minutes later. By 11:35, troop headquarters is established on the southern edge of the beaches. At 11:40, the first effects of the drug make their appearance. 2 Marines are reported to the troop commander for insubordination, no one realizing that their behavior was due to the first effects of the drug. The drug is also beginning to affect the other men. They no longer take cover, they relax and begin to giggle. At this time, one man is more severely affected than the others, losing all contact with reality, dropping his rifle, and becoming unable to take any further part in the operation. In fact, he has to be withdrawn from the exercise a few minutes later. They advance over open country and suddenly come under effective fire from the brick hut on their left flank. Umpire rules that 2 men have been killed by this fire. One of them is the radio operator, who by this time, 11:50, has become incapable of operating his set effectively anyway. At this point, 45 minutes after administration of the drug, these men, although becoming more and more detached from the reality of their environment, are still capable of effective response to any sudden stimulus. However, their response is for limited periods only, after which they again become indecisive and lethargic in their movements. But 70 minutes after the administration of the drug, with one man climbing a tree, the troop commander gives up, saying, "I cannot do anything about this. I cannot control the men and I can take no action myself. I am wiped out as an attacking force."
Here are the facts. In the film The Manchurian Candidate, shadowy communist forces used brainwashing, hypnosis, and drugs to turn an ordinary US soldier into an unwitting assassin. This soldier has no knowledge of his experiences. Here's where it gets crazy. During the 1950s, the CIA ran a top-secret operation codenamed Project Artichoke. According to a CIA memo from 1975, Artichoke is a code name for the study and use of special interrogation methods and techniques. These methods include the use of hypnosis, drugs such as morphine or sodium pentothal, and psychological torture techniques such as total isolation. Project Artichoke arose from Project Bluebird and eventually transformed into the more well-known Project MKate-Ultra. Over the course of this project's lifetime, it addressed several disturbing questions, such as, can an individual be made to perform an act of attempted assassination involuntarily under the influence of Artichoke?
But some governments and corporations, for the first time in history, have the power to basically hack human beings. For this new era, in which humans are now hackable animals. You know, the whole idea that humans have, you know, they have this soul or spirit and they have free will and nobody knows what's happening inside me. So whatever I choose, whether in the election or whether in the supermarket, this is my free will, that's over.
To this day, the details of this murky operation are largely unknown. There is evidence that the CIA used LSD on interrogation subjects and also conducted numerous interrogations and experiments with other drugs, searching for a combination of techniques and substances that could produce extraordinarily compliant, suggestible individuals.
My free will, that's over.
The CIA has acquired intelligence detailing an imminent threat.
What kind of threat?
An invasion. An alien invasion.
Come on, that's not even funny right now.
No, sounds completely crazy.
Well, I don't know. Where exactly is this intel coming from?
Her name is Rebecca. Rebecca is part of a new, highly classified intelligence gathering program developed by the CIA called MKate-Ultra. It involves precognition, seeing the future. MKate-Ultra to investigate the paranormal, intelligence purposes.
Psychics is a national defense strategy. What's next, voodoo?
And that you told us about.
So, what do I,
Please stop talking.
Shelter you find. Settle down and make the best of it. If there are others with you, help them by being as calm as you can.
The American Central Intelligence Agency has been accused of manipulating citizens of countries all over the world, including Canada. At the moment, a number of Canadians are considering suing the CIA. They believe they are victims of covert CIA experiments. Tonight, two Canadians who feel the past 20 years of their lives were damaged by the CIA tell their stories publicly for the first time. They believe they were part of a CIA project called MKate-Ultra, a research project so secret that even the Canadian government was not informed that the agency was funding activities in this country. The CIA was seeking a new weapon, aimed not at the body, but at the mind. Americans became obsessed with brainwashing during the Korean War. Prisoners of war returned home denouncing the American way of life. Hearing them parroting propaganda, the CIA became convinced the communists had found the key to brainwashing.
The purge trials.
Dr. John Gittinger was the CIA's chief psychologist for 25 years.
There was continued pressure put upon anybody within the agency in connection with trying to explain or understand brainwashing. So we were charged with rather an elaborate attempt to try to find out chemical, psychological, any kind of means that people could use to influence the behavior of the people.
Nothing seemed too bizarre. To find out if sex could be used in spying, the agency studied San Francisco prostitutes and their clients. Under code names like MKate-Ultra, the CIA spent 25 years and $25 million on secret mind control research. Brainwashing could be a powerful ideological weapon, and the U.S. had to have it. So the CIA set up a number of fronts, respectable foundations like the Human Ecology Fund. Sounds innocent enough, but it was run by the CIA's brainwashing experts. Here at McGill University in Montreal, the fund found 3 projects worth financing. They supported an extensive study of witch doctors.
What's next, voodoo?
Supported an extensive study of witch doctors in Nigeria. How, investigators wondered, did native healers cure mental illness? What mysterious drugs and potions did they use? But it was only recently that the man who made the film found out that he had been working with the CIA's money, McGill University. News of his connection to the CIA came as quite a surprise to Dr. Raymond Prince.
I couldn't imagine why the CIA would be interested in my work in looking at indigenous healers in West Africa.
What's next, voodoo?
The Human Ecology Fund also helped set up the Transcultural Psychiatric Research Review. The largest MKate-Ultra research project, this one directly related to brainwashing, was carried out at the university's psychiatric hospital, the Allen Memorial Institute. Located atop Mount Royal in a mansion with the eerie name of Ravenscrag, the Allen Memorial was once the most prestigious mental hospital in Canada. The unorthodox treatments of its director caught the attention of the CIA in the mid-50s. Dr. Ewan Cameron, the first director of the Allen Memorial, ran the institute with an iron hand for 20 years. An energetic, enigmatic man, Cameron was an internationally honored and respected psychiatrist, but he was not universally liked. Former colleague, Dr. Elliot Emanuel.
He was an authoritarian, ruthless,
power-hungry, nervous, tense, angry.
Here he had his subjects photographed before and after treatment. Dr. Cameron may not have known that the $60,000 research grant he received from the Human Ecology Fund really came from the CIA.
Rudolf Hess.
Nonetheless, it now seems ironic to some that Cameron was called to the Nuremberg trials to examine Rudolf Hess. For it was at Nuremberg, after Nazi doctors who experimented on prisoners of war were condemned, that a code of scientific ethics was adopted.
Right? Now, who is Kurt Waldheim? I got a little thing over here. It's called my brain. Let's check it out. Kurt Waldheim was, he was in the Nazi rat lines. Camps Ashcan and Dustbin. Oh, that's where they found Heinz Kissinger. Oh, yeah. Okay, so he's working for the Department of Defense, and he became UN Secretary General. So let me say it again. The United Nations had a Secretary General for like 10 years who was a Nazi intelligence officer. When we're talking about globalism and Nazi eugenics, these people didn't lose the war. They won the war and told everybody, no, America values won the war. No, we didn't. And Kurt Waldheim being involved all the way to Schwarzenegger proves that point. Go to Dustcan in Ashbin. What did they do? The Germans and MI6 and the CIA went through the Germans and they said, let's split them up between us. So Ashcan, that's the American version, and Dustbin is the British version. This is fascinating research, by the way. John Foster Dulles, didn't we just talk about him a couple of minutes? Oh, Alan Dulles. Now you're starting to put it together. The people that killed Kennedy are the people who funded the Nazis and put Hitler in power in the first fucking place. Okay?
Yeah. It's not
That's
just
what
Werner
you're
von
up
Braun
against.
with technology.
And the longer that your little mental illness calls it a conspiracy theory instead of reading the history of the people killing you and your fucking family, I mean, I don't even know what to say about people.
For it was at Nuremberg, after Nazi doctors who experimented on prisoners of war were condemned, that a code of scientific ethics was adopted. Research must be completely safe, and research subjects must give full, voluntary consent. Documents recently released by the CIA reveal what research Cameron proposed. To make patients receptive to repetitive messages, Cameron suggested using chemical agents to break down ongoing patterns of behavior, chemical agents like LSD. LSD was almost unknown in the late 50s and not yet widely tested. Despite the horrible hallucinations small doses can produce, Dr. Cameron left some of his patients to unsupervised LSD trips. LSD trips were terrifying to patients who had never heard of LSD and who had no way of knowing why their world was suddenly upside down.
One minute I would see the doctor there, the next minute I wouldn't see him there, and they were asking me all kinds of questions, and I remember them telling me that I was getting smaller and smaller, and I really felt myself getting smaller.
The first pressure was being based on the idea that there was some kind of truth serum or truth drug or something on that. So the people who knew that end of the business, they were definitely beginning to look in terms of chemotherapy. And of course, to people in this day and age, it's very hard to believe that the period before 1960 was a period which was certainly not a chemical culture in this country and not a drug culture in any sense of the word.
With some patients, Dr. Cameron tried a drastic treatment called depatterning. Massive doses of electroshock, 20 times more intense than the standard shock treatments used today, were administered to patients who were kept sleeping for days.
But depatterning is a use of electroshock treatment in a totally different way, in which instead of giving the shocks, say, 2 or 3 times a week, they're given 2 or 3 times a day for 3 or 4 weeks, reducing the patient to a sort of animal, vegetable state, from which it's hoped that they would recover in a more healthy state of mind. It didn't work.
To put patients to sleep for up to a month at a time, Dr. Cameron used a combination of depatterning and large doses of drugs. Individual taped messages were repeated to sleeping patients 15 hours a day in an effort to brainwash them back to health. Now, Cameron reasoned, with their negative memories obliterated, positive suggestions could be implanted. Suggestions like, begin to assert yourself, express your anger. Dr. Cameron called his technique psychic driving.
Use affirmations such as, I am powerful, I am pure, I am light, I am happy. I am going to find my soulmate, I am financially successful, I am awesome, I am great. But they're deficient in belief. You see, they don't believe in the words that they're saying. And this really just boils down to the type of person that they are. They don't believe in much, in life.
And if you study personal development, and if you study as much of this stuff as I have, literally over $100,000 worth, hundreds of books, some of the best seminars, and you study all these people that are into personal development, you see that they are all on board with positive affirmations. So I'm on board with it too. I've been using it now for about 6 months. You've been using them actively, and I've been getting some amazing results.
Positive suggestions could be implanted. Suggestions like, begin to assert yourself.
The CIA was interested in Dr. Cameron's work on psychic driving because it could give them an idea of where the personality could break or be stressed.
Yes, this is the reason that we were interested in Dr. Cameron's work.
Patients came to the Allen Memorial Institute from all across Canada. Dr. Ewan Cameron, it was said, would give them the best psychiatric care money could buy. Dr. Emanuel thinks Cameron's use of extensive electroshock, depatterning, was somewhat unethical.
The quantity, the frequency, the intensity, and the sort of animal state to which it reduced the patients.
Beginning in 1945, American and British organizations teamed up to gather as much military, scientific, and technological research as possible throughout occupied Germany. As German research facilities were seized, Allied force groups began to confiscate war-related documents and materials and interrogate scientists. One particular document was the Ausenberg List, a catalog of scientists and engineers working at the service of the Third Reich. Run by the Joint Intelligence Objectives Agency, or JIOA, the covert operation dubbed Operation Overcast, then renamed Operation Paperclip, involved having 1,600 German scientists and their families brought to the US during the Cold War to work on America's behalf. The objective was to use German intelligence to develop America's arsenal of biological and chemical weapons, ensuring that they didn't fall in the hands of the Soviet Union. While President Harry Truman sanctioned the operation, he forbade recruiting any Nazis or Nazi supporters. In spite of this, the JIOA bypassed this directive by hiding any incriminating evidence of possible war crimes from some of the scientists' records. Despite going against the Nuremberg Code, which prohibits experimentation on human subjects without their consent, MKate-Ultra was conducted in secrecy for over a decade and experimented with, quote, the use of biological and chemical materials in altering human behavior. According to journalist Stephen Kinzer, who wrote the book Poisoner-in-Chief about Gottlieb, Gottlieb wanted to create a way to seize control of people's minds, and he realized that it was a two-part process. First, you had to blast away the existing mind. Second, you had to find a way to insert a new mind into that resulting void. In the early 1950s, Gottlieb arranged for the CIA to buy the world's entire supply of LSD. Once he had collected all of the LSD on US soil, he began distributing it under the guise of bogus foundations, sending it to hospitals, clinics, prisons, and other credible institutions to begin administering it in a series of research projects.
You brought up MKate-Ultra.
Yes.
MKate-Ultra was a government program run by the Central Intelligence Agency. Originally started as something called Bluebird in 1948-49, morphed into Artichoke, and then in 1952 became MKate-Ultra. It was a mind control program, a brainwashing program. The CIA was trying to learn how to control people's behavior without their knowledge. Now, this all came out in Senate and congressional hearings in the 70s. It was exposed, but nobody knew about it until 1974 when Seymour Hersh, the New York Times reporter, reported it on the front page of the paper. So their main objective was to create what they called hypno-programmed assassins, people who would kill on command, popularly known as Manchurian candidates, after a book that was written in 1962 and later became a movie and then a movie again. The people would be, through drugs and hypnotism, the objective was to get people to go and commit an act of murder against their moral code and have no memory of their programming.
That mind control techniques are being used against us by the United States and by President Obama. Field Cersei is with us.
You know, there are Democrats out in California that are fighting this as well because of loss of property rights. Rosa Corey, she's written the book Behind the Green Mask. She's a Democrat.
Yeah, but see, none of this has to do with Agenda 21. Agenda 21 is non-binding. You know, the word mind control pops out. What is this Delphi technique that the president is using to?
The Delphi technique is a method of facilitated consensus that is being used in visioning and consensus-building workshops all over the country to develop comprehensive plans for local communities. And the Delphi technique is to basically, if anyone objects to the plans, that person is marginalized or ostracized. If they, become belligerent, obviously we're facilitators.
Name it. It is bipartisan, global screw job. The system that calls itself liberal, that they are the globalist operatives using that as camouflage. And she joins us now, Rosa Corey.
Hey, Alex. What we're talking about here is the erection of a totalitarian state right in front of us. This is what globalization is. It's the standardization of all systems.
She said, I'd like to address this meeting of the Harper Valley PTA.
2035 vision said participants will gather in round tables and have discussions. This is a giveaway to the Delphi technique. And for those of you that are unfamiliar with the RAND Corporation's methodology in mind control, at symposiums, even at an IEEE symposium, you need to understand how we have been manipulated on all levels in society and on a global basis with the Delphi technique, which literally is an extension of the Tavistock Institute and is mind control of all meetings. All meetings are controlled through a predetermined outcome with the illusion of public participation, when in fact it is already decided.
Hi, I'm Alex Abaya. I'm the author of Soldiers of Reason, the RAND Corporation, and the Rise of the American Empire. Originally, the RAND Corporation was an offshoot of the Air Force, which wanted to recreate the Manhattan Project. As you recall, the Manhattan Project was when civilians and the military got together to create the atomic bomb. After World War II ended, a general named General Henry Arnold wanted to make sure that that same combination of civilian scientists and military know-how got together so as to be able to create new weapons. If we're talking about the robber barons, if we're talking about people like Carnegie, about Ford, Rockefeller, well, yes, I mean, there has been always a link between think tanks and the big, powerful economic interests. Specifically, in the case of RAND, there has been a link between RAND and the Ford Foundation. In fact, the attorney who drafted the Articles of Incorporation for RAND was the same fellow who later became the first president of the Ford Foundation. And their goals are very similar. Their goals were to have a world in which you have technocrats running everything.
A school is nothing less than a company. And if you look at it, I call this the capital model. Once you go through the paradigm shift of looking at a school as just a private company that has profiteers, they have owners of the company, the banks, insurance companies, and Wall Street represented in they're called benefits. Even that's distorted. It benefits the banks, insurance, and Wall Street more than it does anyone else. So everything has a distorted language. Those are the owners of the company, the employees and the management. The management is the school board, the Board of Education. This is the privatization of state industries, the for-profit
They're supposedly being included to get input from the public to help officials make final decisions on taxes, education, community growth, or whatever the particular subject matter might be. Sounds great, doesn't it? Unfortunately, the surface appearances are often deceiving. You, Mr. and Mrs. Citizen, decide to take part in one of these meetings. Generally, you will find that there is already someone designated to lead or facilitate the meeting. Supposedly, the job of the facilitator is to be a neutral, a non-directing helper to see that the meeting flows smoothly.
Actually, he or she is there for exactly the opposite reason. To see that conclusions reached during the meeting are in accord with a plan already decided upon by those who called the meeting.
Here we have 40 members of the public with 9 school board members. Each school board member is paired off with a table of 6, apparently neutral public members.
It is therefore the job of the facilitator to find a way to cause a split in the audience, to establish one or a few of the people as bad guys, while the facilitator is perceived as the good guy.
Of these 7 tables, at the table I sat at, we can see most of the people at the table were supportive of the project and part of the company. Besides the board president facilitating, there was an ex-board member who openly and actively tried to agitate me. There was a spouse of a school employee who would go along with the process. There was a real estate opportunist with art school plans that he was already discussing behind closed doors with the superintendent, the empty middle school. There was a passive supporter and there was a passive opponent. These people said almost nothing. All questions were directed towards the goal of closing the middle school. All questions were, how can we make it safer to close the middle school? How can we save more money in closing the middle school? These were timed, so you were pushed along. And if you resisted, then you would get arguments from the ex-board member that the decision had been made, that you were being belligerent, that we're not going backwards. The whole idea was to get me angry, upset, and isolate me amongst the members of the group as a crazy person.
The process used to facilitate the meeting is called the Delphi technique. The Delphi technique was developed by the RAND Corporation for the U.S. Department of Defense back in the 1950s. It was originally intended for use as a psychological weapon during the Cold War. However, it was soon recognized that the steps of the Delphi could be very valuable in manipulating any meeting toward a predetermined end.
But all in all, the strangest thing about Stranger Things isn't just the fact that it reflects so many topics and themes that are a part of real conspiracies involving secret government projects and interdimensional entities and the development of things like psychic powers and dimensional portals and all the rest. It's the fact that even the show, Stranger Things, is itself actually a part of that grand conspiracy. That, quote, ancient work, the Mystery Babylon agenda. Far more than even most conspiracy researchers even realize.
Mind control. Mind control.
Dark Journalist. Thank you very much, everyone, for being here and get to a higher stage of understanding exactly what's going on in terms of not only politics, but the larger picture here. Includes all kinds of things, including secret societies and political operations, spiritualist activities, all the different kind of levers of power and reality and existence that we see going on. When we go into these ideas, certainly, you know, they come from the more obscure end of the pond, and they're not fast food, shoot 'em up mysticism, political junk. But when we've moved now further back and we went into some of the figures from Theosophy, you know, we're starting to see these political mystery school technology connections that are getting us closer to what this is actually all about. And in the case of Theosophy and Anthroposophy, there were lots and lots of information coming out in the early 20th century, late 19th century, concerning Atlantean airships, just before we get flight. Rudolf Steiner is someone that I cite very often, who was the leader of Anthroposophy, who started off in Theosophy, and who was really the best educated of the whole group. And what he did was he explained exactly the process of what went down, which is after the scientific materialism started to take over the mystery schools who had held this knowledge, they were sworn to secrecy, they were under oaths. And many of the groups, coming from the Rosicrucian groups, the Egyptian mystery schools, and aspects of the Masons, and so on, they were doing basically what they thought was in the best interest, because they felt, and their lineage is, when they had let this information out earlier, things had happened like, the great Atlantean destruction, for example. When we got that level of knowledge for humanity, boom, all of our future went away. And he hints at the dark arts of the Atlantean sorcerers. And he breaks off, saying in a footnote, "For the present, it is not permitted for me to make public communications about the origin of this knowledge and these arts." He says, "A passage from the Akasha Chronicle must therefore be omitted here." And when people get to a certain level of spiritual development, this is what they can do. People like Blavatsky, people like Steiner, Edgar Cayce have talked about being able to just go there and read this Akashic record. That's how we get so many good accounts of things like Atlantis. And so we have to kind of keep that in mind as we're moving along, and just thinking, well, these are secret societies, they're up to no good. Might not necessarily be the case. There might be good secret societies and bad secret societies. We're obviously seeing a balance there. And the next thing that they decide to do is let out reincarnation from a mystery school point of view into the broader culture, targeting the West in particular. Let's take a quick look at her. That is Helena Blavatsky. And I think it's interesting that the mystery schools and the masters, quote, associated with them are looking to women. I think that they realize that women, Besant, Blavatsky, Mary Baker Eddy, these different types of women they're looking at, they seem to be really reaching out there and thinking maybe women can pick this up. That is a very interesting person that shows up on the scene to help found Theosophy. And her name is Emma Hardinge Britton. She came out of a occult group when she was a child, and in a way,
you could almost say her early life was like being in my lab, because she was recruited because of her incredible psychic abilities. She was somnambulist. She would go into these trances.
You could almost say her early life was like being in my lab, because she was recruited because of her incredible psychic abilities. She was somnambulist. She would go into these trances. She would, she kind of did these casing trances. Blavatsky was noted for saying about Emma Britton that she had never seen a more clairvoyant trance channel. But she made the comment saying, if I could combine her psychic ability with Annie Besant's incredible courage and intellect, then we'd have this kind of super being. That she grew up under unusual circumstances that are in her bio. But in the book Ghostland, she talks a little bit about how she got into this early on. And this is where we get into this Orphic circle controlling her life early on. Once they find her and discover that she has these abilities, they start to use her. When quite young, in fact, before I became acquainted with certain parties who sought me out and professed a desire to observe the somnambulist tendencies for which I was then remarkable, I found my new associates to be ladies and gentlemen, mostly persons of noble rank. And during a period of several years, I and many other young persons assisted at their sessions in the quality of somnambulists or mesmeric subjects. And this is very important because Mesmer, of course, was this incredible doctor from a century earlier, that she's saying that they're using these kids, these psychically gifted children, of which she was one, they're using them as a mesmerist subject. So they're kind of getting them into these trances, and they're, putting them into this kind of sleepwalking trance where they can ask them, a la Cayce, the aristocracy of the period. This is in London at somewhere around the 1830s. And I'm also going to tell you that the name Orphic Circle has been caricatured, and everything from games to people talking about occult societies like the Golden Dawn. So we'll go on with Emma. It was one of their leading regulations never to permit the existence of the society to be known or the members thereof named. We need to stop at Bulwer-Lytton for a minute, because Bulwer-Lytton did a series of books, including The Coming Race, which dealt with Rosicrucian themes, about this Vril society that lived underground and had amazing technology. He's got the airships in there. He's like the early sci-fi writer. But for now, I'm going to say in regards to Bulwer-Lytton, the airships, the Vril, again, he's talking about unusual technology, like Steiner and Blavatsky and all the rest of it. They all understand how important the Rosicrucians were. And later, we'll find people like Walt Disney are members of the Rosicrucian Society in America. So, this is something that really, Gene Roddenberry, for example. But suffice to say on that, we really are looking at this combination of technology with a mystery school. But here's what she has to say in relation to the name, the Orphic Circle. She says, the Society of Occultists to whom I can now only allude and who are named in Ghostland as the Orphic Circle. She doesn't say that their name is the Orphic Circle. She says that in her book, she named them that. I found that very interesting. But I feel that, by the way, the name Hardinge, which is a surname that she used her entire life, even when she got married, came through her work with this occult society. And people like Bulwer-Lytton were very close to people like Dickens. And oddly enough, her father was named Ebenezer. So I really found that very interesting. From there, this is a very, almost like Illuminati lifestyle, because as a child, she's kept from other kids and they develop her as a psychic and they have her do all this stuff, but they don't tell her really what's going on. But during some of the trances that they put her into, beings appeared and, poltergeist activity was observed. And so it got out of hand at a certain point. So what they do is they put her in a kind of traveling situation. Her father dies and she's hooked up with this traveling, theater company, and they go to Paris with her mother and stuff. But her abilities are so off the charts that when she's playing piano and things like that, she can do whole concertos and, she's absolutely inspired. And Emma will go through these incredible experiences, and it really looks like there's a guiding hand, watching, keeping an eye on her psychic development. She eventually winds up going to New York, and the newspaper that she's familiar with in London while she's there says, if you want to, you can write these articles for us about the American spiritualism movement. Now, what's fascinating is it's a few years later, and even though she's been in these occult groups, her mind is kind of wiped clean. Which is why I say this story is very much like a MyLab story or, a typical kind of MKE-Ultra style story where they've kept her in the state of mind. But by the time she gets to New York, she's actually cynical about spiritual things and spiritualism. And this is Emma Hardinge Britton that we're talking about, who's a very important early spiritualist who, she wound up giving readings for Abraham Lincoln. And actually, when he died, she gave this impassioned political speech. They sent her on tours across America during his election, going out and saying, get the vote out type thing. She was a very inspirational speaker, I guess, because she was an actress in addition. But she was a very kind of fascinating figure to hit America at that point. And so when she comes in and she's observing these seances and things that are going on in like 1840s America, she's very cynical about it all. And she's lost that kind of connection with that whole world that she had when she was part of the Orphic Circle, although she discovers it later. And one of the things that happens is she gets into a seance room, and the medium who's conducting the seance is a young, like a 16-year-old girl who has this incredible psychic ability again. And the girl says to her, you are basically the best medium I've ever met. And all these strange things pass, where she tells her a message from her father who passed away. And it's a very dramatic scene. And what happens is basically Emma's ability is known in New York, and she just becomes the most important medium psychic in this whole period of time. And in a few years, a decade or two down the road, Blavatsky will show up and she will form the Theosophical Society with Emma, and Emma will split away from her, as we see this in the mystery schools very often, and because she thinks it's going into Eastern a direction. But the thing that Emma is giving us, really, is that she's telling us that this Orphic Circle was developing these children for incredible psychic work, psychic espionage, but also exploring the relationship of man and the universe and things along this line. So we're getting an opening here when we're looking at these people like Bulwer Lytton, who's a part of this society, using somebody like Emma to get this information.
Arrest and an arson charge.
Sinclair represents an academy where girls like you have gone on to do incredible things. Welcome to Blackwood.
Young girl, no one survives this place.
Slumber party? Why choose us? For what? To come here.
Because we're screw-ups.
But so are a lot of girls. School on fire.
Ghosts aren't real, even when you want them to be.
Wow. She's telling the truth, like I was remembering it.
Remembering William Kessler's music?
Yeah.
Emma Britton, who was one of the people who set up Theosophy and broke away because she thought it got too Eastern. And Blavatsky said she was the best trance medium that she'd ever met. When she was between 11 and 13, through some connection with her father, she had a very unusual association with this occult group that she called the Orphic Circle.
Mm-hmm.
And they used her as this kind of somnambulist trance channel. Mm-hmm. But she said that the leader of the society was Bulwer Lytton. And she said that. Yes. And the groups of people that would come and do this with her were noblemen, were the aristocracy in London, and they used her for this. But I find it very interesting. I was reading The Coming Race by Bulwer Lytton, and I'm picking up Rosicrucianism, Vril, underground societies, airships.
Bulwer Lytton is interesting to me because he's the first one that I'm aware of that popularizes the idea of, the Vril, the ether, this all-pervasive energy that is behind not only physical forces and phenomena, but consciousness and conscious effects and spiritualism and things like this.
Hypnosis as we know it today had its origins in the unique medical practices of Dr. Franz Anton Mesmer, a physician who lived in Vienna, Austria during the mid-18th century. Mesmer was a fervent believer in the more esoteric aspects of Western medical tradition, including the influence of astrology and magnets on human health. In 1774, during a magnetic treatment with a female patient, Mesmer felt that he perceived a fluid flowing through the woman's body whose flow was affected by his own will. He eventually named this fluid and its manipulation animal magnetism, and developed an elaborate theory regarding its effect on health. Mesmer believed that every individual had magnetic fluid flowing through channels throughout his body, and that blockages in the flow of this fluid caused emotional or physical disease. He believed that certain individuals had more or less innate animal magnetism, and therefore varied in their ability to manipulate the flow of this fluid.
If you look at the spiritualists, the Swedenborgs, the Blavatskys, the Bulwer Lyttons, what do they emphasize? They all emphasize not only the power of mind and of consciousness, what they're really saying is the observer. And that, of course, is absolutely front and center in quantum mechanics.
And this is part of the observation changes the effect.
Right,
yes.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. It's, the uncertainty principle in quantum mechanics is very, very simple. You cannot measure the position of an electron and the momentum of an electron at the same time. Well, that means prior to making any measurement, you've determined the outcome. And of course, that that has, that needless to say, that set everybody, back on their rear end, because that wasn't supposed to happen. In the 19th century, Victorian scientific materialism, you had the spiritualists, the theosophists, the anthroposophists, and so on and so forth, on the other side of the equation, saying you need to look at this. But then along came Heisenberg and the uncertainty principle, and there you are.
Yeah, right.
You can't ignore it anymore.
And when we think about where it could have moved to, this is another thing that I'll go back to Steiner on. He gets to about 1916 and he says, basically, anthroposophy and theosophy have failed. And I did a show on John Keeley and Annie Besant and how she made great pains to hide his technology and make sure it wasn't gobbled up, basically. And again, we have that kind of mystery school, public mystery school in this case, reaching in and trying to prevent the public. And in fact, she says this is something the culture can't handle until it upgrades.
Let me find that book, and I will read it. There we are.
You know that people want a shot of that bookshelf.
All right, here we go. Let me read this. We see, quote, we see that the old geometers have made use of a kind of analysis which they extended to the solution of all problems, albeit they have hidden it from posterity. I well realize that they must have known a kind of mathematics that was very different from today's common one, not that I think they knew it perfectly. And indeed, some traces of this true mathematics seem to me to be still to appear in Pappus and Diapanctus, who, though not belonging to the most ancient ages, lived many centuries before our times. I would also think that later on, it was suppressed by its very authors because of a certain wicked slyness. That's René Descartes.
Wow.
Here's
slyness.
Yeah. Here's Isaac Newton.
Okay.
To be sure, the ancients' method is more elegant by far than the Cartesian one, for Descartes achieved the result by an algebraic calculus which, when transfused into words following the practice of the ancients, would prove to be so tedious and entangled as to provoke nausea, nor might it be understood. But they accomplished it by certain simple proportions, judging that nothing written in a different style was worthy to be read, and in consequence concealing the analysis by which they found their constructions. That's Newton. This is Leibniz. This is my favorite. Algebra in which numbers are not the issue. Certainly, it is by this art that they unfolded those propositions, otherwise we would not have had them for such a long time, which only with difficulty would we find by using our modern methods. I think I have attained and discovered the foundation and first lineaments of this art, with which, once we have found the right symbols and established some principles, we can obtain everything else, listen carefully, by an imitation of calculating, and with no need to follow the lines with our imagination. That's yeah. So my suspicion is, looking at all of this esoteric lore, looking at the spiritualists, the theosophists, the anthroposophists, and so on, that whole 19th century movement, and in looking at the higher ranks of Masonry, my suspicion has always been that they are looking for some sort of analytical key that will be a formally explicit means of looking at all of those magical systems and saying, this is why it works.
All right.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. And this key idea, I think, is absolutely fascinating, too. You know, it's interesting because those 19th century movements, we have over and over again the idea of schools,
Yes.
and the idea of secret teachings in schools, and very often, I'd say 90% of the time, masters.
Yes.
So this is fascinating to me because when we would look around now in the 21st century in this kind of high-tech reality, if you could call it that, this idea of secret schools and masters seems further away from us than it would, say, at the turn of the 19th into the 20th century.
Yes.
But even then, it was kind of a fantastic idea.
Yes.
And we have people, like I mentioned, like Bulwer Lytton and these people referring to this type of thing also. But what is that strata there? That seems to me to be the tail end of a whole move by some part of these mystery schools to release information out to the public and see what happens.
Yes. Yeah, I think part of that release, I think I'm with you. I think that was a very deliberate move. But I'll tell you why I think in part that they did it. They, taking again those three quotations here, is, you know, these three mathematical geniuses, you know, one's an alchemist, the other guy sits around and invents analytical geometry, and then Leibniz, you know, he's off in his own crazy little world all the time anyway. You look at what they're saying, and they're saying something huge. They're saying that there's a method of mathematical analysis that can be applied to consciousness itself. That's what they're really saying. So when you have these schools releasing this stuff, I suspect in part what they're also trying to do is they know that they're missing some key crucial insight, and therefore they're releasing enough information to see if anybody out there can come up with it.
Oh, they're kind of crowdsourcing.
Yeah. Bingo. We've got to remember that these mystery schools preserved, you know, you can read Adam Weishaupt if you want to get the modern version of it. But here's a guy that's collecting methods of copying wax seals and invisible inks and, you know, the whole 9 yards. So yeah, he's interested in encoding things, you know, steganography, putting it out in the open, so that you can look at a symbol and say, aha, that's a brother lodge there, you know, and that's not over there. That's exactly what I think is going on, and I think it's very old.
When I came across it, I was fascinated. So in about 1884, there's this very famous medium operating out of Virginia, and she has this enterprising husband, brother. And they're, you know, he kind of gets all these people into her mediumship and all the rest of it. And during that mediumship, he asks, I want to make a thing where people could understand what you're doing. And this is where the Ouija board comes from. And at a certain point, he says, what can I call the game? And she says, call it Ouija. And but as he's designing it and all the rest of it, he gets this great idea about using all these symbols. And I'm going to show you the first version of the Ouija board, and I'm going to ask you for your live comment here.
Okay.
Holy
cow.
First version of the Ouija board.
Oh, my word.
Yeah. And it's fascinating. There is that incredible esoteric angle.
Oh, yeah.
Nazi rise.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's
you can't look at the Nazi party rallies and see anything else other than occult ritual.
Yeah.
Writ large. Everything is calculated very, very carefully. In fact, if you look at those rallies, you'll always have Hitler, Hess, and either Goering or Himmler, three people. And that's coming right out of Joachim Fiore, that medieval dispensationalist that I mentioned earlier.
Right.
Because he's got the three figures constantly in his thinking. So, the Nazis are latching on to all of these symbols. It's everywhere. It's absolutely everywhere. Just look at Hitler's gestures alone sometime when he's speaking.
Yeah.
You'll see this ancient occult technique of Sprachlogik, using gestures to punctuate particular parts of speech. And some of the gestures are very chilling, very, very chilling.
Mm-hmm.
The symbolism of them, if you stop and examine what he's doing, and think about the symbolism, it's very, very chilling.
He's there's also a big party platform about Atlantis and how they're the descendants of Atlantis and all the rest of it. So
Yes.
very openly esoteric.
Yes, absolutely. William Henry, I don't know if you're familiar with his work. I like William's work because he's very familiar with the occult. He wrote a book years ago called One Foot in Atlantis. And it's a study of occult technique and symbolism in the United Kingdom, United States, and Nazi Germany during World War II. And it's chilling because when you look at what he says about Nazi Germany, he's making it very clear that you have here a great power that is dedicated consciously to revivifying Atlantis in modern
They
times.
certainly have a drive to control the themes in society.
Part of a major component of the mind control, mind manipulation techniques that MKate-Ultra, the CIA, Tavistock, a lot of these things did, was they penetrated the arts and they deliberately created, please hear me now, they deliberately created a form of modern art that they have pushed on people to get them accustomed to two things. Number one, ugliness.
Yeah. Oh, yes. 100%.
Ugliness. And as a result of that ugliness, a deadening of the innate human faculty to be able to think on several levels simultaneously, which, has returned us to the jungle. They've done this as a means of changing the culture and shifting it out of that Renaissance, Hermetic, Christian, and Enlightenment humanism basis of our culture.
Well, absolutely. And they've degenerated the culture dramatically.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Actually, I want to request a question. We have Tessa Dick in the audience, and
yes,
she's a fascinating writer, and of course, she's the ex-wife of
Philip Dick.
I also wanted to say hi. So many great people. We had a great, fantastic crowd tonight for Dr. Farrell. I'll tell you, a cult priestess is out there. It's nice to see her out there.
Hello and welcome to the Freeman Perspective. Because what we're finding is that the symbols and the signs incorporated into the architecture of our nation's capitals and government buildings are actually dedicated to a god and goddess. So as we see here, what we have is Aphrodite, and this is coupled with Hermes. Now, this is where we get the word hermaphrodite. And this is given out in the tarot as the magician card and as the empress. And what we'll find is that each of the tarot cards has significance in this. We'll find these gods and goddesses put together as obelisks and archways, but then they also incorporate what is known as sacred geometry. Is the courtyard of St. Augustine. And in this courtyard we find quite interesting things, such as this statue. And this is a statue of Ponce de Leon, where he landed in in 1513. And they erected many edifices to honor themselves. Now perhaps, being that this man was only 4 foot 11 inches tall, this might explain why he felt the need to construct so many erections. Because St. Augustine is covered in obelisks. Once you recognize that our leaders are not who you think they are, and that they have no concern for the human well-being, that they can buy and sell humans at will, and you'll start to understand. Because these are the warmongers, building large fortresses in order to conquer lands. But they seem to find their roots back in ancient Atlantis, in the merfolk. So you see this merman on this cannon, which is in the fortress, and of course the fish monsters adorning it. But who is it that owns this cannon? Well, it just happens to be Yale University. Isn't that where the Skull and Bones Society is? Where the CIA was formed? So I thought I'd look a little deeper. And there's a man named Flagler that owns much of St. Augustine. And this is his college. And I found the campus surrounded by implements of destruction, with spiked mace balls and even what seemed to be an Iron Maiden, devices of torture. Henry Flagler showed his sign as he kept his hand here in the pocket. This is called the hidden hand, and that's exactly who these men are, the hidden hand behind everything. But on his lion's gait, I couldn't help but notice some unusual features. Notice here we have a couple of cherubim riding on fish monsters, and then in between them is a child in a portal, and what could be astronomical symbols of the crab and the lobster. I have found that these men, these ones that we call our leaders, are into traumatizing children. And they seem to have some strange connection to these merfolk or amphibians. Now the owl symbol came to light when Alex Jones snuck into Bohemian Grove. And he found many of the leaders of industry and of the government worshiping a 40-foot stone owl. And he equated this with the esoteric or occult orders of the Skull and Bones and even the Nazis. So I was really curious as to what these Satanists or these evildoers were really up to. And what was the symbol behind this owl? Because it seemed they burnt effigies of bodies to this 40-foot stone owl. Thank you, Alex, for sneaking in there and getting that footage for us. The symbol is actually one to denote secrecy. Our goddess is known in Hebrew as the Shekinah, or the Shekinah. And you will find that Saddam Hussein was actually placed into power due to the fact that he felt he was Nebuchadnezzar reincarnated. So when the Shekinah came down and struck Nebuchadnezzar, using the mother of all bombs, shortened to the Moab, well, this was all ritual ceremony. It wasn't warfare. These are ritual ceremonies. Consider 9/11. The Twin Towers had a Masonic cornerstone laying ceremony on 9/11/1966. The Pentagon had a Masonic cornerstone laying ceremony on 9/11/1941. Curious that they would demolish these buildings on this same ritual date. As you know, if you've watched the Freeman Perspective, I am very curious about the goddess and her potential ET connections. Because as I look at her, and I find her as a symbol of the star cluster Sirius, I also find that Sirius is known for its fish people, or merfolk, as Atlantis was always known for its merfolk. And certainly trying to escape the UFO or ET connection with this goddess is a very difficult thing to do, because it pops up everywhere. So I sit and I contemplate on these signs and symbols that I find. Could it be that our leaders are connected with fish people from Sirius? Well, that's what the signs and symbols seem to show.
Sometimes we find the art of mastering a bit tricky. Sometimes we nail it.
I found a book on how to be invisible.
I take back every bit of energy I gave you. You're nothing.
You do something great. You have no power over me.
Does Elvis talk to you?
Trouble starter, punky instigator. I'm the fear addicted, danger illustrated. I'm a fire starter, twisted fire starter. You're the fire starter, twisted fire starter. I'm a fire starter, twisted fire starter. Bitch you hated, filth infatuated. Yeah, I'm the pain you tasted, belly intoxicated. I'm a fire starter, twisted fire starter. You're a fire starter, twisted fire starter. Twisted animator.